Hi folks, you're with Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about this situation where politicians and senior public servants leave political life and go straight into super well-paying jobs, paying vastly more than their parliamentary salary would have been. And they go into these private sector jobs on big bucks. And I'm thinking of one now whose parliamentary salary was a give or take about $200,000 a year, and they had they were the lower end, if you will, of the senior politicians in that was a regional government. Now his base salary, he's gone to work for one of the big multinational firms that depends almost exclusively on government contracts. And he gets his base salary is $1 million a year plus all sorts of bonuses and sundry benefits, travel benefits. I mean, he'd be on like $2 million a year, sort of all cashed up, more actually with stock options and so on. Now, what credentials he has is questionable. He's got some degree. He was like an activist guy at university. He's got some third tier degree in political science or some shit like that, and not a rigorous or onerous degree. He was a flunky for the trade union movement, and then got given a gig in Parliament for some sort of centre-left type political party, and he finished his political career in some disgrace for fiddling paperwork and filing false claims, these sorts of things. But nonetheless, he went straight from there into exceptionally well-paid employment. He went to work for a government quango that paid about 6 times, 7 times the average wage plus benefits. You go straight out of there now into this big multinational firm where their Australian office relies if it's not 100%, it's 99% on government contracts, and they do these mass labour hire scams where they bring in vast numbers of illiterate peasants to do all sorts of jobs. So clearly, it's a globalist scam as well. And he's paid, let's say, a couple of $1 million a year. But the list goes on. He's a politician that entered Parliament just living. They had like just an ordinary 3-bedroom house in kind of an upper middle area suburb, but nothing fancy or exclusive. They now have, they've been out of politics for a few years now, but they went straight into a sort of this consultancy that consults for the big multinationals and makes a lot of money. And he now has acreage, as in several acres of prime harbourfront, waterfront land in one of the most expensive postcodes in Australia. And so he's gone from fairly modest. Now again, he was a reasonably senior politician, but there is no way his salary could have even got him anywhere. On top of being that, he's also been able to buy real estate at incredible knockdown prices. Absolute bargain. I mean, the guy's he's a genius as a real estate investor, and he's able to get these incredible bargains to buy and then sell them a year or two later to a cashed up Chinese investor who pays way over the card for the property. So anything he buys for, this guy can buy for $100. He's able to sell for several $1,000s. Oh, wow. I mean, I wish I had that ability. So he's somebody who's very much in bed with the big banks and the big international financial investment firms, the BlackRock type thing. And so and now this is not unusual. So what we're seeing here is in the case of the big pharma, the big industrial, big military industrial, all these sorts of things, social media firms and so on. A former British politician was hired into a social media firm on a multi-million-dollar salary, and the list just goes on. And so there's a very small group of people who are becoming very rich by helping the globalist sort of cause and helping the globalist ideology into further the globalist program, and they're very willing to do that, to sell out and make a lot of money in the process. Nor are these people skilled or talented. There's I know some of them, and I've been sitting next to them at a lunch or a dinner or at meetings where they've been there, and I think, holy fuck, how can these people have these roles and then they get into? But clearly they're useful for, in some way to the globalist goons and the globalist cabal, which is why they're being richly rewarded. The jobs that are paying best today, or the roles, situations, positions, call it what you will, that are paying the big money, are the globalist enabling, part of the globalist cabal. Like a diversity and equity inclusion director will be paid, twice what a senior engineer or an engineer in charge of a big bridge building project would get paid. And you say, just another thing, just this globalist enablement thing. There's a local council, and local councils are always screaming they haven't got a penny to their name, and they can't afford this, and they can't manage that. And always claiming, we can't fill the potholes on the road. We just don't have the resources. And yet, they're advertising a job, and I always keep a lookout on these diversity, equity, and inclusion type jobs, because the extent of it indicates, I think, the level of social decay in our society, but also indicates the diversion of resources, as in taxpayer money collected here, the diversion of resources away from productive purposes and into social engineering purposes, which the globalist ideology, of course, needs. But this is a job for someone to coordinate lesbian and trans painting classes in this particular council area, and it pays just over double the average wage. Now, the sort of person they're going to get into that job would be some cheap race hustler activist or something like that, LGBTQ hustler activist, grifter, and who in reality would at best manage a job of pushing a broom in McDonald's in terms of capability, but they're going to be gifted. Some activist will be gifted this job. They'll go through the NGO network, and the NGO activists have sort of infiltrated all these councils, and so just another NGO activist will be given this not just a well-paying job. I mean, double the average wage in Sydney doesn't really get you anywhere these days. But nonetheless, it's better than being on the average wage or less than the average wage or something. But so just in terms of jobs where you don't have to do anything and that are useless parasitic jobs, it's quite well paid on that relative scale. So it'll go to an activist in that class is paying just over double the average wage. But who needs a coordinator for transgender and lesbian painting classes? I mean, for fuck's sake. So that's the sort of insanity that goes on at all levels, not just with the politicians. I just want to get this politicians thing. How do we stop and how do we adopt a mindset in the West and standards of probity where we say, well, that's not acceptable. You can't be legislating for and on behalf of and administering a particular sector of the economy, be it pharmaceuticals or anything else, or in military weaponry. You can't be doing that, and then immediately when you finish your stint in politics, you go and get a job on gazillions of dollars in that same category. That smacks of corruption all the way along. If you bring out laws that are very much against that sector, they're not going to give you a fucking job. Senior politicians who have legislated against various economic sectors, whether it be, again, pharmaceuticals or anything else, have legislated against or have not been the friend of business. As soon as they're out of politics, they can't get a job anywhere. That's it. They're finished. They've got no career outside of the political career they had. I mean, I'm thinking of one prime minister now who he did some very good real estate deals while he was in office, which sort of means he doesn't really need to work again. But and his parliamentary salary is, it's decent. His pension is decent. So, but he's got no career in the public sector at all. Whereas, another politician that did a lot of cozy deals with the big banks and big finance. No sooner was he out the door of the political door than he walked straight into numerous directorships, endless amounts of super lucrative consulting roles and this sort of thing, which would have been just to introduce the people to politicians, get things done. I just want to give you an idea of when you come across someone with real influence. I was talking to, this is some years ago now, I was talking to a guy and complaining how difficult it had been to get to talk to the right people in a certain government department, given the products this company I was working for had to sell. And so I was pointing out how they were making their own lives difficult, and there were people who were obstructing it for really just feather their own nest type reasons, and because they didn't want to be accountable and that sort of thing. He listened quite carefully, didn't say, regarded me with, he was checking me out and sussing me out, that sort of thing. But he looked at me quite carefully while I was talking, and not necessarily listening to what I was saying, but just getting the vibes of me as a person. I mean, he was listening, but getting the vibes as much. And at the end, when I'd finished, he looked at me, he nodded, and he picked up the phone and he called somebody, I'm not sure who, and said, look, I want somebody to come and see you, Billy Bob. He's got some concerns. I want you to look after him and remove any obstacles that are in his way, words to that effect. And put the phone down, and he said, it's all fixed. Now, that's all it was. So I went to see someone who before I'd come across them, and they'd been less than helpful, I thought. And when I appeared, they, I got an appointment straight away to see them. There wasn't any delay. And they, what do you want? And so I said, done. That was it. That's the influence some of these people have. So, we tend to forget there are people around who have that level of influence. They can pick up the phone and just get something done. You don't have to go through filling out forms or justifications or anything. You can. That's it. Now, that's the only time in my life I've ever come across that, and I hadn't expected it. It was. I'd more expected someone to say, "Well, if you fill out this form, everything will be fine." I'd expected something along those bureaucratic lines, but just a phone call that wouldn't even have lasted 30 seconds. So there are people out there with this sort of influence and this sort of capacity to influence things. So this is the type of, I would call that corrupt, because they can bypass any of the processes. Now, the processes themselves may be corrupted in order to engineer outcomes that are not honest or impartial. So that can go both ways. But looking at this politicians or even senior public servants, look at that guy who was the COVID czar, if you like, in England, in Britain. And he's accepted as I understand it, a very lucrative role with one of the pharmaceutical companies that he had oversight over during the COVID business. So now I don't know how much. He's not a young man. I don't know how much he's going to be paid, but one imagines it's pretty decent. It's not like Moderna's short on cash or anything. So is this an acceptable process? Now, look at it from the company or the business point of view. It's a very bureaucratic process getting things done at the government angle. You've got a lot of government regulation, a lot of government oversight committees, very easy to fall foul of the wrong people, so on and so forth. And navigating through those bureaucratic labyrinths, can be difficult. These companies already have armies of lobbyists, so it's not like they're unaware of the things that are going on. But if they can get a lobbyist who is an inside man, who knows everybody's phone number, has got everybody's mobile phone number, who can get to people quickly that need to be got to, and so on, then why not hire somebody like that? So this is the company's point of view, the business point of view. So why not have somebody like that on staff? That's so the issue is, should people be, whether they be senior public servants or politicians, where they had direct or indirect oversight over a particular sector of the economy, should they be permitted to work in that economy, working for that business or companies that are in that business? And that sector of the economy, should they be permitted to have that? Should they not have any sort of jobs at all outside of politics for, say, 5 years or 3 years or some period of time, so that events and things have moved on since their involvement? Now, if you're going to do that, stop somebody from working and stop them from gaining, probably the only sort of employment they really could get, that is influence peddling, and then you're denying them the right to earn an income, that sort of thing. So it's really a conflict of interest thing, where why should you go and work for companies that you were previously administering? Were you offered this job quite some time ago, provided you passed or approved of legislation or got committees to make certain decisions that favoured that company or that industry sector? And if you did do that, was your employment prearranged? And if so, it was corrupt, clearly corrupt. It's the equivalent of accepting a bribe. And that's really the nub of the issue. Now, I think this is widespread. I think this is exactly what's going on. That on one hand, they're really legislating on behalf of these companies in expectation they'll be richly rewarded with a high-paying job, with profits that have been made possible by the decisions they have made on behalf of those companies. Therefore, they're effectively being bribed. So, and maybe they've already been bribed, indirectly. So the big, for example, the big pharmaceutical firm make sure that their buddies in the big bank look after that politician. So it can't be said that there's any direct payments. So that the politician just happens to be able to access a number of incredible real estate deals, which yield vast profits for them, and that's really the corrupt payment, and they're getting in advance, and they're made to know about it. Now, they can also be behind the scenes. I mean, there's one politician who was administering the financial sector, and he had 2 sons and a daughter, and both the sons were given very high-paid consulting jobs for one of the big banks, and in an overseas posting. I think it was in London. So this is an Australian politician. So the 2 sons got very well paid. Absolutely, given fancy bachelor pads in downtown London, given very well paid jobs and prestigious job, do nothing jobs where they don't have to do squat. And the daughter was given in some financial newspaper that was owned by one of the big financial firms, was given a job as sort of a journalist come marketing consultant, which involved endless round the world shopping trips and so on. Again, a do nothing job, being paid very well with luxurious benefits. Now, in return for that, this politician legislated on behalf of the banks and protecting their profits, protecting them from competition, protecting them from all sorts of things. And in return, this politician was richly rewarded. So these sort of things are going on all the time, whether direct or indirect. So the idea of a politician retiring on their pension, their pension from their time as a politician, this sort of thing, that's all gone out the window. Now, in terms of stopping people from earning an income, I think that for 3 to 5 years after leaving politics, they shouldn't work, but in return they must be rewarded for that, or given a generous payment for that. So they have to have at the absolute bare minimum the salary that they were getting while they were a politician. And now, if they want to start up a business, lawn mowing or something like that, that's fine. But any sort of business in any area, direct or indirect, that they were associated with while in political office, they should be barred from that, but in return should receive maybe they get a nice house in a good middle class area gifted to them by the state, something. But the trying to break the cycle of corruption is definitely a priority here. Now, there are also different types of people in the political class now. The days of dedicated public servants and dedicated to their fellow citizens and improving the lives of their fellow citizens, people who've achieved something in their own right before getting into politics, that's all gone. That's all out the window. I mean, so many politicians now have just been flunkies and interns and operatives in the politician's office, and they just get gifted that electoral district, which may be, dyed in the wool Democrat. No Democrat will ever lose in that district. And they may be gifted these things. So they've never actually had a real job. They've never existed outside of the ideological vacuum of politics, and it's definitely that, an ideological vacuum. So really, this idea of the dedicated public servants gone, and at the same time, the globalist cabals moved in, corrupting politicians left, right, and centre. Not that it never happened previously; it was much harder, much more difficult to do. When people are dedicated to their fellow citizens, dedicated to public service, dedicated to standards of probity, then corruption isn't impossible, but the extent of it, it's much harder to do, and the extent of it, and you have to be very careful. If you on a politician's salary, if you suddenly turn up with a waterfront property and a nice yacht, off the jetty of the waterfront property, then where did the money come from to do that? And you'll be investigated. But that's not the case now. Politicians whose salaries couldn't even dream of covering property purchase, they're not investigated. No one asks any questions. Where did the money come from to do that? How have you managed to make 10 big ticket stock market investments, all of which have yielded huge windfall profits? How are you able to do that? How are you able to have so many real estate transactions that generate such vast profits and so on? So these things should be investigated, but they're not anymore. Everyone's in on the act, and so nobody's really asking those questions. Now, former prime ministers from 50 years ago would die of old age in maybe a nursing home, or maybe they'd die in their sort of 4-bedroom, ordinary middle-class suburban house. Maybe they do that, but and likely they would, and they'd exist on their parliamentary pension. But that's not the case anymore. Politicians that enter public office with just their ordinary 3 or 4-bedroom house in the suburbs will leave public office as maybe a senior politician, and they'll be living a lifestyle. They'll suddenly walk into super lucrative employment, and they'll be living luxurious lifestyles. Just an example: a regional politician who now acts as a bag man for one of the big multinational firms that relies almost exclusively on government labour hire type contracts. His base salary is over $1 million. Then with all the added stuff thrown in and the benefits and the bonuses and all sorts of stuff, it's well over $2 million a year. Now, for a guy who was just a union hack on the average wage, not that long ago, $2 million a year plus is a lot of money, and all he's got is his political contacts. He's got nothing outside of that. He's definitely got no great intellect, but he's him and others have been, they leave public office and they're showered with very lucrative job offers for nothing more than they've got the inside contacts. Now, I think we have to break that cycle, because call it what you like, but it's hideously corrupt. And I believe that in order to return probity to the Western polities, that we have to break this cycle of corruption, because it's succeeded in detaching the body politic, the politicians, the political class, the so-called elites today, as we refer to them. It's detached them from the rest of the populace. They're now a separate class looking out for their own interests, and they see their interests as tied in 100% with the globalist interest, the ideological and subset of that, the financial interest. Their interest no more is in the nation or their fellow citizens or anything like that, or the future of the nation. It has nothing to do with that. It's simply along with the globe, and the globe, that this system of corrupting and rewarding, it not only aids and abets that, but ensures its continuity. And I think unless we do something to stop that cycle, it's going to continue and will now get worse. You know, you look at the people like the Rishi Sunaks and so on. They're gagging to sell out the British public, gagging to do it in my view. And these, I mean, he's already rich, or his family is. I think his wife's family is very rich. But this idea of rewarding people for services to globalization rather than services to the people that supposedly voted for them, employed them, that's the divergence that we really need to correct. You know, they're responsible to the people and the lifestyle they have, and should be representative of the lifestyle of the people. But instead, they can detach themselves from the people and live a lifestyle of opulence, whilst presiding over the deterioration of the lifestyle of, again, their fellow citizens. You've been fantastic to throw your pushback channel. Thank you for listening.